Hi there, welcome to the final episode of the Bonsai Stuff podcast for 2024. Scott Martin from Bonsai Matsu, thank you very much for listening in as always. Hope everyone had a lovely Christmas and we're getting ready to celebrate the coming of the new year, the wrap up of 2024 and the beginning of 2025. It's always an exciting time for me around now because I get to sit back, put my feet up, catch my breath for a little bit, look at what really worked for me last year, look at what maybe didn't work, what I can improve. But then more importantly, I get on to setting plans and targets for myself and my trees and my bonsai about what I'd like to do in the coming year. So that way it doesn't catch me by surprise and I'm well prepared, which I love to be. So this episode of the podcast is just really to wrap things up, what I've learned, places I've been, people I've met, all that sort of thing for this year, for this bonsai calendar year. And to say thank you again to everybody who subscribes to the podcast. Really means a hell of a lot to me and makes me spurred on to keep going producing content. This is episode 51 for season 6 of the podcast. So out of a 52-week year, there's been 51 episodes of the podcast, which blows my mind, to be honest. So thank you very much for the support, and let's jump into it, eh? I've said it before, I really love this podcast. I love the format of it. I think it's a great way to stay relevant and continually in touch with a lot of people, especially for Australian bonsai and people interested in Australian bonsai, but moreover bonsai in general, because give it 6 months and we're pretty close to what we should be doing. Weather dependent, of course, based on where you are around the world. But I see this podcast sometimes as a friendly reminder of things that can help you with your bonsai and what you can do to get maximum fulfillment out of your trees. These lovely little things in pots that we work on. So when I look back through all the different episodes, I thought, I really loved some of these episodes. I've really enjoyed what when I sit back with a pen and paper and on my phone and my note section, I sit there and plan for this podcast and have some quiet time by myself where I just really enjoy the thought process to say how can I offer something more? How can I, rather than just filling your day in with my droning voice, it's a matter of offering something that can be used going forward in perpetuity for the rest of your bonsai life, and that's how seriously I take it. And one of the biggest highlights for me this year was the episode where I talked about the bud conveyor. That bud conveyor has been something which has been niggling away at me for years and years and years, and the constant question that I get asked is, that looks great now, but how do I maintain it? How do I keep it to this point? How do I make sure that this doesn't get too long and too big? And there's always this talk about the 5-year cycle where things get too big, too long. You have to cut back and reduce and all the rest of it. But the piece of the puzzle that was missing was the talk about these inner buds. And I've talked about inner buds before, and you all know about inner buds and how good they are and how they fill in structure and all that sort of stuff. But the concept of the bud conveyor, I've used that a lot this year talking to people when I do workshops or presentations or just having a chat. And as soon as you start to explain the way the conveyor works in that cyclical motion where it's continually pushing new buds from the inner, if the trees are looked after and maintained, and that's the crux to it all, I suppose, to successful bonsai development or to achieving your design targets is to make sure that they're strong and they're healthy. And when they're strong and healthy, they react a certain way. Trees will react a certain way. And one of the ways that they do it is to push those buds further in towards the trunk where there's sunlight and there's airflow, and they can not waste resources on something which is just going to grow and die. So by all this periphery stuff that we do, this maintenance work that we do on our bonsai and protecting them and developing them and feeding them and building their strength and then getting them to push these inner buds, which then in turn works really well for us with this bud conveyor, because as something gets too long, we can cut it back, but there's something to replace it. So our trees can look and maintain a style or a design or a feel or a flow or whatever, however you want to think about it, they can maintain that because those inner buds are there in the first place. And if they weren't, then you'd be stuffed because you'd have to remove the entire branch or start looking at some spaghetti bending on the branch to try and suck it back in to the point where it's going to fit the design still. And good structure, good bonsai, that's the key to it all. And all of that is pivotal on you and what you do with your bonsai and how you treat them and how you respect them and how you do the work that needs to be done, the repotting work, the pruning, the everything, the fertilizing, the watering, the daily care that we do when we look at our trees to make sure that they're not being inundated with pests, or if they are, what steps you take to make sure that they can come back bigger, better, stronger than they ever were before. So I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that one, and it was like a light bulb moment when it sort of talked in my own head, trying to put it all together in the background of saying, oh, well, how do you explain that? Like those inner buds, what do they do? It's like, it's like a conveyor. They just keep going. Anyway, so that was a real highlight for me. The other one that I really enjoyed this year was what I would tell someone at the beginning of their bonsai journey, because I just wish, I wish that I had a podcast all those years ago. It would have saved so much frustration and so much anxiety and so much fear about how to look after your trees. And that was the one that I suppose I used to really struggle with, was the fear of repotting, the fear of pruning, the fear of wiring, the fear of killing this thing that I'm beginning to fall in love with. It's becoming part of who I am. Like, it's a tree, and trees are really, really special and really important to me, and they are to you too. Like, listening, if you've got, if you're at episode 51 of season 6 on this podcast, then I can guarantee you that trees are important to you too. So let's just take that as a given. But really, if I'd been sat down and someone had spent half an hour with me and just said, listen, before you go nuts, before you go crazy, this is what I'd like to tell you. These are some golden guidelines about what you should do, what you shouldn't do, how you should look after things, how you shouldn't look after things. It'll make your life a lot easier. I guarantee that, being the young, bullheaded fella that I was back then, I didn't really listen to many people anyway, as I'm sure most of us didn't, and I would have done it my own way anyway, and possibly would have still gone down the same path of learning things the hard way. But I really like that episode, because it does provide something to a lot of people where you can stop, you can think, you can listen, you can take the right steps, and being, I suppose, being independent from a lot of people that listen to the podcast, then it's easy to take someone that's independent to you, their advice. But if a family member generally tells you something, I know from my experience, when I was told, don't do that, I'd go, yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to do. So I did have to learn things the hard way, and I did enjoy putting that podcast together, because it sort of it allowed me to sit back, think, and reminisce on some of the stupid things that I'd done and the mistakes that I'd made, and to learn things like not drilling small holes into the trunk of my trees to try and fatten them up, or hitting the trunk with a rubber mallet, because it'll do serious damage to it. But anyway, that was another one that I really loved. And finally, the episode. Oh, look, I loved a lot of the episodes, but I don't want to recap on every single episode that I've put together. I thought that would be a dead boring way to finish up the year. But anyway, the one that I really loved was a more recent episode where I talked about windswept bonsai. It makes me laugh, because there was a lot of passionate discussion that took place after that, which was all very positive. I loved it all. I really did. And I'll reiterate, I've got nothing against wind affected stylings. I do have an issue with the wind swept, with those big arcing branches. But anyway, and this is the part I love about anything to do with design, is that it's so unique. It's us. It's a piece of us that's put into play with a living form of a beautiful tree in a pot. So I did love the fact, for me, that driving across the Nullarbor, across central, inland Australia, and and getting there, seeing trees that had been sort of battered by the wind and how they grew. Not that I'm one for thinking that bonsai has to take on an entirely natural form. It doesn't have to always look like a tree in nature, because most of the trees you see in nature are ugly. We design them to be as beautiful, or as our perception of what beautiful is when we design those trees. But that wind affected one, I just loved the engagement and the thought process, and how there was so much of people confidently coming forward saying, "Well, this is what I think. I love it. I reckon that's awesome. That's healthy. That's good for bonsai that we think about our trees like that. Don't ever don't ever just sit back and go, oh, someone said this. I should do that. Scott likes his trees to look like this, so I'm going to do my trees exactly the same way. That's the last thing that I want. I want independence. I want you to be happy and feel the way I feel. Like, I walk around my yard and I look at my trees and I'm like, I love that tree. That is brilliant. And if you've seen anything that I've put up on Instagram, I don't know how many times I've posted a photo of a tree saying, oh, this is my favourite tree. Oh, this is my favourite tree. I say it almost every post because, honest to God, hand on heart, that's how I feel about my trees. I love them, and I love for that passion or that feeling to be passed on to anyone else. And if you're looking at your little windswept tree with its big arcing branch, and you're going, "Oh, Scott said I should cut that off," I'm definitely not saying that. I'm definitely not. I just want you to be happy. I want your trees to be happy and healthy. I want you to be happy and healthy, and I want your bonsai journey to continue forever and ever, and for you to feel, a spark of what I feel whenever I say the word bonsai. It makes my hair stand up on my arm because I love it so much. But anyway, they were the 3 episodes. So the Bud Conveyor was episode 9. If you're interested, what I tell someone about their starting their bonsai journey was episode 16, and the wind affected chat was in episode 40, towards the latter half of the year. Anyway, so. All right, let's jump into the next section of the podcast, which is my highlights from around my yard with my bonsai. As I progress on with my bonsai journey, which is still got a long way to go, still nowhere near the finish point, thank goodness. I've changed my approach from one of wanting massive transformation. Like, when I say that, think about demos where you see a scrubby bush and 20 minutes later it's turned into this magnificent looking bonsai, and it's torn out of its pot, chucked into a pot, and it's auctioned off at the end of the night, and everyone goes, wow, that's fantastic. How good's that? My approach now is very different from wanting to see that. And one of my highlights is that almost every, I'll say almost, but I believe it's every one, but almost every single bonsai that I have in my collection, I can see a small incremental improvement in. And that makes me so happy. I don't have to have massive transformations in my trees. I just have to see small incremental improvement over time. So I can look back at photos of a tree, or I can walk past a tree and go, that branch has really developed really nicely. Or look at that inner area there. Look how full that is now. So when it gets time to work on that tree, be it whatever it is, when it gets time to work on that tree, I know I'm going to have plenty of options in there to take another step forward with the tree. And that makes me really proud, especially when I look along trees, and if I had doubts about, something like repotting, should I leave it for another year? Should I just wait? Like, could it do with another year in the pot before I do it? And then I've repotted it, and I see how healthy it is and how it's bounced and how the fertilizing's really done its job that it should have. That's what makes me really happy with my collection, and really sort of a pat on the back proud moment where I can look back and go, yeah, it was worth it. Like, we're getting to a quieter period now, as the heat of summer starts kicking in, everything starts to slow down. The lawns finally are starting to turn brown and stopping being needed to be mown every 2 days, which is nice. It's a nice time of year. But it's, there's obviously other issues that come with that extreme heat, but it's a quieter time with your bonsai. So you can sit back and look at things and assess them and have a look and say, did it work? Didn't it work? Where am I at? Should I have done something different? That sort of an independent, honest review that I do with myself all the time. And the other thing that in my yard is, as I walk around and I look at my trees, or I put them on the trolley in the workshop, I never say to myself, I'm never. This sounds really weird, but I'm never 100% satisfied with the tree that's placed in front of me. I never sit there 100% content when I put it down, and that's deliberate. Like I never put something down and say, "Oh, that's perfection." Like that is it, because I reckon I would become bored with it. I'd become lax with its care, and not having a target, not having something to strive for, would take away the passion when it comes to that tree. So every time I look at a tree, whether it be walking around with watering, whether it's, the 2-second walk around to pluck some weeds and have a quick look at the tree as I dart to the next tree, I never look at it and say, "Oh, that's perfect. I don't want that to change." I always look at it, and I'm never 100% satisfied. Which is that's not a negative thing. It's not. I'm not saying I'm disappointed with myself, or that you should be if you feel the same way. I actually love it that that's the fact, because I get to look for those small areas of improvement. And like I said, back to the first point, one of the best achievements or a highlight for myself this year around the yard was that I could see small changes in my trees. And that comes from never being fully satisfied with what's presented in front of you. And I enjoy that part of bonsai. I love the fact that there's always something to do. I don't look for massive transformations in the trees. That's not what I'm saying. I don't look at a tree and say, well, if I chop the apex off and brought this branch up, then I could redesign the tree. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I look at the tree and go, that's lovely. I really love that. But what can I do better? How can I make that tree even better than what it is now? And that gives me buy-in. That gives me investment in the tree, and it makes me fertilize it. It makes me water it. It makes me repot it. It makes me check it for pests every single day of its life that's sitting in my yard. It makes me want to spend time with it, which is really important. So that never being completely satisfied and always looking for ways to improve, I find is a real plus for me. And like I said, it's not a negative thing, and I don't get frustrated with it at all. If you get frustrated with your bonsai, then I think maybe bonsai isn't for you. It should be I find it exciting. I find it really satisfying too, that I can look at something and go, yeah, if I just did that, imagine how good that would be. Imagine that would take it to the next level. So you're never looking at things being completely done. And I've said it so many times. Every single bonsai that I see, every single one, whether it's yours and you come into my workshop, whether you've posted a photo and you're on the other side of the world, whether you're one of these masters around the world, whenever I look at any of your trees, I always look at them from the point of view of what would I do differently? How can I change that? And that, as I said so many times, it's not out of disrespect. It's just I find it very satisfying to think about those areas of improvement and adjustment. And they might be microscopic. It might be seen as insignificant, but I think that keeps me fresh, and it keeps my bonsai journey fresh as well, because every single tree that I look at, there's something for me to work with. Whether it's only a mind game, I never think about it in reality of, contacting someone saying, "Hey, listen, have you thought about cutting this branch off, or wiring this one so it goes slightly down a bit more to the right?" I don't do that. I do it from my own mental well-being when it comes to bonsai, thinking I could really sink my teeth into that tree and do this or do that, or adjust this, or I would look at then whatever it is. But anyway, that's been one of my highlights for 2024. The other one is the next section of the podcast. I'm going to talk about different places I've been, but one of the absolute highlights for me is the connections with bonsai people that I've made throughout this year, whether it's, local, interstate, whether it's international. People have reached out and put their heart on their sleeve and connected with me in one way or another, whether we've done a Zoom, whether it's just an email, whether it's via one of the online forums, whether it's a direct message. whatever it is. Honestly, I can't tell you how much that's meant to me, and I love it. It's really, really nice to know that this little podcast that started just out of the desire to want to help and grow bonsai anywhere it could possibly reach now has the reach global. I look at the stats for this podcast and it's insane. The amount of listens that it's had and the countries that it's listened to as well is actually it's daunting to know that it's got that kind of reach. But the connections with the people, the bonsai people, becoming part of their bonsai network, that I think is one of the most important things that we can have. That's an honour for me. So thank you for taking the time and putting your trust in me for it as well. And it's certainly making the world a much smaller place for me, which is really nice to have that that connectivity. It's been awesome. So anyway, without getting too soppy about it, thank you very much. I love you. The other thing that I've really enjoyed this year too was the intensive programs, where it's gone a level up for me, not just being a couple of hours to try and fill people's heads with as much information as I possibly can. It's actually been over days, which has been such a more satisfying format for every single person that's been involved, but also for me too, because I feel like there's nothing worse for me than sitting down after say a training session and putting my feet up and reminiscing about what's just happened, having a beer or a cuppa, and then suddenly go, oh damn it, I forgot to say whatever. Oh, this part would have really worked well with that. Whereas when it's over those multiple days, everything seems to flow a lot nicer. People get finished with beautiful trees. They've got such a nice skill set, and their confidence. That's the big thing. So I've really loved those intensives, and the intensive that I had with Aaron over 10 days from New Zealand, from Christchurch. That was really satisfying. That was great. That was a whole nother level too. So I'm not exactly sure in my own mind what the future's going to hold for me with those sort of things. But I know that as I look back on that and the learnings and confidence and all that sort of stuff, I think that they were really good, a much more positive experience for everyone. So that's been absolutely some of my highlights around my yard for 2024, and I hope that you've enjoyed listening to me ramble on this podcast about different little bits and pieces. But anyway, it's been a great year. So 2024 was a busy year for me and for Bonsai Matsu. Traveling around everywhere. There was Christchurch, New Zealand for starters, and there was the Bonsai Open, which I absolutely loved, up on the Central Coast in New South Wales, at Ballarat, Adelaide, and the Olive Bonsai Dig. That was an absolute freaking highlight for me for this year. That was such a good event, and if you get the chance, if the South Australian Bonsai Society opens up an olive dig to you in any shape or fashion, then I would strongly recommend it. Absolutely brilliant bunch of people. Brilliant. It was such a nice club. There was such a well put together event, and I'm glad I could have been there at the start when the idea sparked off, because I look at my olives that I dug on that weekend that are growing like crazy, as I know a hell of a lot of people's are as well, and people are still talking about that. So that was brilliant. I really loved my trip to Adelaide. Up to Cairns as well, far north Queensland, tropics, first trip up there for bonsai, and that was brilliant. That was such an eye-opening experience and such a great club of like-minded people. I really enjoyed that. Brisbane to Beamer, whoa, you're one of the best clubs around Australia. And then the WA road trip, heading over there on the road for a couple of months, and it was just bonsai. Perth, Mandurah, Albany, Bunbury. It was, that was a highlight. That's a trip that I won't forget in the distant future. I can tell you that's going to be with me for a long time. So I've really loved when I look at a map and see where I've been to around the country, and the openness and hospitality of people, and that I've said it before, but bonsai people are from all different walks, all different backgrounds, all different paths. But when you put us in a room together and we've got those little trees sitting in front of us, we are all exactly the same. We all have a passion, which it just, like, seriously, as I'm saying this, the hairs on my arm are standing up, because it's that tree love that we have. It's so common that I've seen everywhere. Everywhere I've been, I've seen that passion, and I find it really, really weird. When you first started, when I first started, I can't talk for you, but when I first started in bonsai, you don't think that something's wrong, but you think you're alone. Or there's, you go to a bonsai nursery and you sort of see some trees, and don't forget, this is before internet, before online connectivity, and everything had to be written down or in print format, or someone had to verbally tell you it. When you first started, like, you sort of feel like, oh yeah, people maybe get it, but I really get it. Like, it is part of me. It's becoming part of me. And when you start to dig deeper and deeper in it, and the tree takes root in your soul, you start to become one with it. And it's hard to put words to it. It's very hard to explain to your nearest and dearest, or to anybody that doesn't have that same feeling about trees. And now it's a lot easier. Like, you can jump online and you can see pages that are dedicated to tree love and bonsai and whatever. But back when I did it, it was sort of like, I'm the only person in the whole world that feels this way about bonsai. There is no one that feels like I do. But now, when I get to travel around and I see people of all different ages, I have young people that come in the workshop with their parents, and they love these trees. It's like, mate, that is me. Like, it's like looking back in a time warp, going, this kid, if I can keep sparking that passion, if I can be there when they need to ask a question, well, they're going to be, imagine how good they're going to be at bonsai. Imagine what their life's going to be like, having these little trees in pots with them forever. Maybe they'll change the world for the better. And and I deal with people that maybe find it a lot later in life as well, but still have had that passion, but haven't known how to apply the technique, or to feed it, to fertilize that tree love that they've got. But traveling around the country this year and getting from one corner right the way to the other, and doing stuff locally in Melbourne here as well, a hell of a lot of it, and getting to New Zealand, and everyone's the same. Everyone's the same. If you listen to this podcast, let me tell you, there is a family of bonsai nutbags out there that are exactly the same as you and have the same passion as what you do. And it makes me think the world's in a good place. To know that there's so many people that have this same feeling for trees. Well, that's not a bad thing. But anyway, that's it, folks. We are done for 2024. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for your support. And thanks very much for the love. It's been brilliant. It's been a great year this year. I've really, really, really enjoyed myself, and I cannot wait to see what 2025 brings on board. I'm looking forward to a couple of weeks off, so the podcast won't be here for a few weeks, because I need to downtime to plan and put some thought into my trees and see what next year is going to hold for me. That's a big one for me, is that start of year planning that I get into. It allows me to really put some serious thought into things so they don't creep up on me and catch me by surprise. And I'm going to love it, to be honest. Hope you all had a lovely Christmas. I know that I certainly did. I hope you have a fantastic New Year. Stay safe. Make sure your trees are number one priority for you when it comes to this period of time, be it the stinking hot that we've got in Australia, or be it the freezing cold that you have in the Northern Hemisphere. Look after them. Make sure that you give them your full attention and spend time with them. Hand on heart, I look forward to seeing you next year. It's going to be a brilliant year for bonsai. Thank you again. And as always, until next time, happy bonsai.